Hi everyone, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. I'm here to speak a little bit about my work at Pratt Institute, the Brooklyn Fashion and Design Accelerator, and Fashion and Community, where we were rethinking creativity to connect, collaborate, and create sustainable change, primarily in the fashion industry. So there is a difference between the conventional fashion industry and the sustainable fashion system, which is what I'm going to talk about. This new system is focused on collaboration and community, which is very much counter to the way the traditional fashion industry works. And this new system encourages sustainability by connecting buying power, supply chain, with the focus on sustainability. But first, I would like to tell you a little bit about me and my background and how I entered the fashion industry. I was born in Montreal, Canada, where I studied fashion design, so my background is as a designer and production coordinator. I moved to New York about 15 years ago in 2004 in order to take a job in the fashion industry there. And this is my first collection, which I designed when I was 5 years old, so I'm still somewhat designing. My design skills have improved a little bit, my drawing skills not so much. But I still work very closely with textiles. And this is my driving force in the fashion industry, what I do, and what makes me feel empowered to make a change, whether it's in my personal life, with social mission, or in my professional life as a designer and consultant and educator. So I'd like to give you a brief overview of my background. So I started a brand called Covet in 2004, which was one of the first sustainable brands on the market in the US. Back then, we didn't have very many options of availability for sustainable materials. I was sourcing everything here in the Far East as well as in India, and working very closely with small manufacturers. In 2009, I left that company to start studying New York because I wanted to bring production to New York City, where I was living and working, and really wanted to focus on sustainability initiatives in the fashion industry, such as zero waste fashion design, which I will talk about later and show you some interesting slides. Around the same time, I started as an educator at FIT, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York City. Study at the same time was awarded 2 prizes for sustainability. One, the Eco Domani Fashion Foundation Award, and 2, the Lexus Fashion Initiative, which was part of the Council of Fashion Designers of America. And in 2014, I joined the Pratt Brooklyn Fashion and Design Accelerator, which is a really, really long word, so I'm going to say BFDA from now on, so you'll recognize that, as production coordinator and sustainability mentor. And the BFDA is what I'm primarily going to talk about today, because that's where we brought together a large part of the sustainable design community in New York City and its environs. And then afterwards, I started studying New York Resource Library, which is a sustainable material consultancy and sourcing agency for local designers to help other designers in the industry find materials because it was so difficult. So fashion lives in community, whether it's conventional and or sustainable, but these systems differ in their perspectives and the way that they nurture sustainability and design. And the sustainable fashion system includes mentorship and collaboration, which is very, very near and dear to my heart, and which are the foundations of sustainability in the fashion industry as far as I'm concerned. This is an image from the BFDA, Brooklyn Fashion and Design Accelerator, where we brought together key players in the fashion industry to help mentor young designers who are just starting out. So we had a variety of brands who were 1 to 2 years old who would come in. They would apply for a 2-year mentorship program, in addition to space, access to space, manufacturing, mentorship, and material sourcing, but also key access to other community players and members and designers. And that's something that is very much missing in the design community in general around the world, is this access to other designers to talk about problems, discuss initiatives, and really talk about design strategies, because usually design is a very lonely and isolated industry, and we wanted to change that. Doesn't mean that there weren't problems. This is me encountering a problem with one of our designers in the production lab. What was very different though is that we had access to manufacturing, so we had a small manufacturing facility on our grounds on site, And usually designers don't have that close of an access to their manufacturing, so they can't walk in and see the factory, talk to the sewers, talk to the pattern makers, and we were giving them direct access to that, to be able to see it every day, and to be able to problem solve very easily within the community. This is another image of one of our designers working directly with our head pattern maker, Roberto, and so he would sit there and talk to them about any problems that they encountered with their designs, how it could be more readily made, how it could be manufactured, both easily but also more efficiently, to save them money, to save them materials, but also to make a much better made product that would last a longer time, that would have quality, and really make people proud to have something manufactured in New York City, and particularly in Brooklyn, which is where we were located. I'd like to give a little outline of one of the first brands who joined the BFDA, a brand who was also run by a couple, Kieran Finch. They had no experience in the fashion industry prior to joining us, which was quite unusual for the brands that we were working with. But they encountered a problem in the industry, and that problem was they weren't able to find well-fitted clothes that suited their taste and their community. And so they launched a line of women's wear apparel that was inspired by menswear, but that would fit the women's body. And so they wanted to launch with shirts, which they're both wearing here, and didn't know anything about the production process. But we were really inspired by their business model, by their business plan. They were very focused on who their community was, who their customer would be. And so we took a chance on bringing them in to mentor them, help them understand the development process of production, of sourcing fabrics, of working with the pattern maker, doing a fitting. And they now have evolved to produce in 3 different countries, including still in New York City, with a whole collection of clothing that has expanded from shirts to blazers and pants, shorts, swimwear, 3 years after launching their company. So it's a great success story for the BFDA and for Kieran Finch. And I think what was really important there is they've now evolved to include over 20 sizes in their production runs. So they're very inclusive as a brand, but now also understand how to manufacture product, which they didn't when they first joined us, and that is a success for me. One of the other things that I think is driving force for me, and this is not exactly accurate as a statistic, but I like to think it is because I have a design background, and I like to think designers have power, even though we don't always. But up to 80% of a product's impact is determined at the design phase. So it's not really true when it comes to the fashion industry, but in some cases it can be, and it can be very empowering. One of the examples we use for this is Nike has developed an app that is free, and I recommend everybody download it. So this app was based on the Sustainable Apparel Coalition's HIG Index, which allowed designers to help understand the origins of materials and their impact based on what you see there: waste, chemistry, energy, and water use. But rather than just keeping it internal for their design team, they put this out to the community and to the world as a free app to allow other designers and consumers to be able to understand the difference in impact between different materials. And this is something that I think is really important when it comes to collaboration and sustainability, is that it takes a lot of people input and joining forces and open source material and not hiding that information. Another example of material sourcing is something we did at the BFDA. So we brought in textile suppliers to talk about their sustainability initiatives. This is one of those suppliers working with one of our designers, speaking firsthand on their sustainability initiatives, as well as their production, how the materials were made, where they're made, the origin, and then really allowing designers to have the full story of the textile and where it's coming from, and also how it can be processed into garments. One of those materials, one of those suppliers, is the New Denim Project from Guatemala, one of my favorite mills. What they do is, what you see here is denim waste from the jean manufacturing process in Guatemala City. They take that denim waste from a local factory, they chop it up, make a new fiber out of it, and spin it into new textiles. Spin it into new yarns, and then weave it into new textiles. What's really interesting about this is that there is almost no water and no dye used in that process, because the denim is already dyed. So all of their textiles are light blue, which I think is really interesting and very beautifully made. So it's organic, or not organic cotton, but it's recycled cotton content. and made in Guatemala City. This may look familiar to some of you, so this is what most people would consider a fairly efficient pattern marker. The industry average for pattern textile waste is 15%, but what we actually see in the industry is that waste is closer to 50%, because what's not counted in this pattern marker is the end of the fabric roll, or the roll of fabric that was discontinued or wasn't approved by the design house because the color was a little off or the print was incorrect. And so this textile waste, which breaks my heart because I have a textile background and I really love fabric, makes me very sad to think that close to 50% of all textiles either go to landfill or end up in some warehouse not to be used. And we're trying to stop that by establishing other ways of looking at waste in the textile industry. So this is one of the ways that my brand, Study New York, has tried to mitigate textile waste. So rather than throw out that 15%, what we do is, on the left, you see a dress that was produced in New York, and then on the right, I don't know how to go back. There we go. Sorry. Whoa, it's doing something. Can we go back a few slides? Thank you. Can we go to this one? Thank you. So that textile waste is cut up by my very, very happy interns, and then woven by an organization called Weaving Hand in Brooklyn, New York, who are a weaving organization who teach classes on how to weave. That's my fabric scraps there. And then we sew this into, oh, I'm very, very excited about this one, didn't want to, thank you. So then we sew that into sweatshirts, which are all one of a kind because they're handmade. Can we go back two more? Sorry. These slides don't want to show. All right, so we'll stay here. So this is a close-up of the hand-woven textile, but something else that we do is have full transparency on the labels. So what you may not be able to see here is that the label just doesn't have the content and country of origin. It also has where the fiber came from, where the farm was, if we know that, where the factory is, and the name of the factory. And what's really important in this is not only a level of transparency so that the consumer knows who bought or who made the product, but also other designers can see what factories we're using, because why not share that information and support the factories that we really support. And the little squiggly line there is actually the signature of the person who sewed the garment, so that we could connect that person directly back to the person who is wearing it, because without the sewer, we would have no clothes, we would have fabric. So one of the key portions of what I believe is we can't solve problems by using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. And how that affects the fashion industry is one with collaboration. And you may not be able to read this, but this is an email that was sent out by the production manager at Mara Hoffman, who told me it was okay to share this email, don't worry. And she had isolated a company in Israel who was making biodegradable polybags as an alternative to plastic polybags. But the problem was that they couldn't buy the minimum order quantity for those polybags. It was too high. And so what she did was put an email out several years ago to the fashion community in New York and asked other designers if they wanted to share the order with her. And what happened was she got 5 other designers who would share the order. The company decided to print 5 different company names on the polybags. And that way they were able to collaborate and use their buying power to consolidate this order. And they're still using these today. Another brand that was at the BFTA is called Story. So this is a technology company who originally launched as an e-commerce platform for sustainable design strategies and sustainable designers, but realized that there was more of a need, less of a need for e-commerce in New York City and more of a need for storytelling and marketing. So they pivoted halfway through their mentorship at the BFTA and decided to launch what is a web platform for sustainable storytelling and transparency. And so they are working directly with the other design firms in the BFTA to be able to help them connect their stories of their manufacturing, transparency, origins to the stores that they already have in e-commerce, and so you can shop directly from their stories, and this integrates seamlessly into newsletters, social media, as well as emails. And this was something that probably wouldn't have happened if they hadn't been surrounded by 20 other designers at the time. So I will leave you with this today. The best way to predict the future is to design it. I strongly feel that that is the case, and I feel like we all have that ability to do so. So I would say thank you, and if you would like to contact me, please feel free to do so.